All right, guys, welcome into the David Ellefson Show. I am Joshua Toomey. That is David Ellefson, and the big news in the metal world recently is Dave Mustaine has come out saying that Megadeth will do one more record, a couple, another tour, and then it's calling it quits, calling it a retirement. And I keep getting hit up. What does David feel about this? And David's getting hit up. How do you feel about this? And I thought this would be a perfect place to kind of talk about Megadeth retirement with the one and only David Ellefson. So, David, kind of what are your thoughts on Megadeth calling it quits after this next album cycle?
There's a lot because, of course, it brings up years and years of thoughts, feelings, emotions, some great, some not so great. I always say these gold records on the wall, which the only reason I have them up is because we have a podcast. But,
right.
It just makes for a good backdrop. But I look at them, Countdown, Peace Sells, Beavis and Butthead, Rest in Peace. They all have a story in them, and, some of the stuff in the 90s were better stories, the band was cohesive, the management was consistent, the music, I think, was collaborative. We went to new heights, we explored new territory that you could only dream of doing. Grammy nominations, festivals, the world for touring was really opening up everywhere. So really great stuff. In the middle of it, of course, and around it was addictions, rehabs, canceled tours, lost finances of, in the millions. And so for things to sort of flush out the way that they did, with now me not being part of the final farewell of something I started, as one can imagine, probably not something I'm super happy about. And saying that while still being grateful for all that it was, you know what I mean? Because I think at some point you have to find a path through it, because this is reality. And, look, I feel like Dave Mustaine ended our friendship in 2001, and that was it. He ended it very loudly, very publicly. He personally signed his name to it. He said we would never play music together again. And that's it. That is it. So from there on, I moved on, and I learned from 2002 with the career-ending nerve damage to his arm. And then 2 years later, there's a new album with a new band and new financial terms, and I'm not part of it. And lawsuits to settle business matters, and, just all the things go. There's a whole story there, of a lot of this stuff. I was out, then suddenly I was back, and it was great. And he and I tried to mend fences as I think we did, he was generous to me. Things were good. Clearly Megadeth is a Mustaine family run business, and it started that way, I think, probably a little while after I came back to the band. Because when I came back to the band, it was Dave. And, I was kind of became the good friend to Dave. I knew him and he knew me, and in a way that no one else could. Dave had his friends before me growing up in California, but I've certainly known him one of the longest of most anybody on the planet, and at least from a inner workings, of a band kind of thing. So, as bands go, though, there can be tensions, there are all those things. Certainly, what was made clear to me in 2004 is, hey, it's a new day. It's a new way. Dave's in charge. It's not going to be what it was. It's not going to be collaborative. Sean Drover always used to remind me that. He goes, dude, those days of us all getting in a room and writing a record, dude, those days are long gone.
Right.
So, and every time, in fact, I remember when I came back and we were doing the 13 album after about a year on the road, Dave asked me, he said, "Oh, I'd like to have you write." I said, "You know what? No. Why don't you write the songs? I'll play bass for you. Let's just keep it clean, keep it simple. Let's not even blur the lines." And that's why I did other musical things. I did the Ellefson solo records and, various other things to just have a little, let me take my creative stuff over there. I knew in no way was that ever going to sort of trump the brand, if you will, be bigger than the Megadeth brand. Yet it was a way to have a little creative outlet on the side, kind of get my yayas without interfering with Megadeth. Because I knew, we got it back together. Let's keep it clean. Let's keep it simple. Let's just do that. And I think every time we tried to write, it was always a sore spot. It was always it was problematic, and I was like, oh, I just wish we weren't even going down this road,
Right.
Now, of course, everybody wants their name on the record. Everybody wants to feel some of the financial windfall, and how things are split financially doesn't always have to be with how they're split, with the credits and stuff like that. It's a weird thing in bands. Yeah, there's a weird thing in bands, as that's how things are financially split. Look, if you're a founding member of a band, to some degree, you should be entitled to a piece of everything and all of it, because it wouldn't exist if you weren't there. And I think that deal got changed in 2002, or 2004. That immediately changed the landscape. It changed my feelings about it. It drew us into a legal dispute, rightfully so. And as much as is like, there's no one wins in lawsuits to some degree, yet sometimes they have to happen because things need to be done the way they need to be done. And I guess the good news for me is financially it landed certainly much better for me, and getting paid directly from my sources rather than, because sometimes that's what happens is money goes through the channels of the organization, and sometimes people don't get paid, and so that needed to happen, and I'm glad I went through the process. It's not a fun process. I didn't sleep for 9 months because of it, but that's when I had my little band F5, and I was trying to at least kind of keep my nose creatively involved in some stuff. So, there's a lot of history here with this band. This band started with a resentment. It started with a fuck you,
Right.
Dave's sort of revenge against Metallica. And it wasn't entirely that. I mean, that gets a little blown out of proportion, to some degree. Dave was his own artist away from Metallica. He had mechanics and some songs before Metallica, and he certainly wrote songs after. So I think that's a little unfair to paint that entirely on Dave, that Megadeth was just this, this revenge toward Metallica. It may have been often fueled by it, but how could it not be? He was there. He was not a founding member of Metallica. He was there for, as I always call it, a year and a half in the life of Metallica. Just
Right.
like, and certainly changed the course of what they did. But they went on and had their own successes. So it's. But look, for Dave to call it quits, or to retire, I should say, farewell. I don't even know if he's retiring. He's just basically saying Megadeth's over. Would I like to be a part of it? Yeah, of course. Like, who wouldn't? I'm a founding member of it. I'm the 30+ year member of it. Is that going to happen? Who knows? I don't. It's too early to tell. I don't know what they have planned. I have no idea what it is. They just made an announcement about it. So, do I think there should be some sort of farewell that everybody gets to participate in? I mean, look back to the beginning with Black Sabbath. Look, they made nice. They brought all four
Jake
Black
back,
Sabbath. Yeah, they brought everybody back. They had Jake. Now, was everybody there? No. There were some key people, Bob Daisy, some people that weren't there. But, for the most part, they brought a lot of the people back. And just speaking with Black Sabbath, they brought the original, the core four back, and they said goodbye. Not only did they say goodbye, everybody got to say goodbye to them. And I think when you're doing a farewell, that's important, that you get to say goodbye and everybody gets to say goodbye to you. I think that, that's an important part of it. But that's me. I'm not in the band anymore. I have no say in it. So that's just me. That's just one guy with an opinion, quite honestly.
Yeah. Well, I think for the fans, I think it would be cool along the way that if you weren't a part of the entire thing. Which I mean, I kind of monitor the internet a little bit more than you do, and most people are saying that they would like for you to be a part of this in some form or fashion. But I think that most people, it will it happen? Will it won't happen? With like getting Chuck Beeler up, if they go through Michigan, or if they come through Phoenix, you jump up, or they're in Japan, obviously with Marty jumping up and Chris Poland. Like there are so many guys, Jeff Young, all those guys kind of that have come through the ranks of Megadeth,
right?
To be able to also say goodbye. Because
Well,
you made a good point. Go ahead.
No, finish your thought.
Well, I was going to say that you made a good point when Sean Drover reached out to you and said, hey, you not only did the Back to the Beginning for yourself, you did it for everyone that was ever in Megadeth. And this is kind of the vice versa to that, to where everyone that was ever in Megadeth should also be able to say their farewell too.
Well, I strongly stand against the notion that Megadeth was only Dave Mustaine, because it wasn't.
Right.
And everybody knows that. And, so, if Dave wants to retire, I get it. I understand. He's given a lot. It's taken a lot out of him. It's taken certainly a toll on him. As we all, anyone can imagine. Right. So look, God bless you, brother. If you're done, this is it. You want to go do something else with your life, spend time with your family, just not play guitar. I get it. I mean, dude, believe me, I'm 60. There's some days I just kind of go, God, really? Should I write another album, another song? Do I really want to go on stage?
Right.
And the answer always comes back to, yes, I do. So I do, so I can't speak for him, and I'm not going to speak for him, but, and I again, I haven't talked to the guy now in 4.5 years, so I have no idea what his reasoning is, what the thinking is behind it. It's, someone made a point. They said, we're all fans of Megadeth music, even if we're not maybe fans of a particular lineup of the band, or we're not fans of certain members of the band. We still all love Megadeth music. And I thought, okay, I'm down with that. I can get behind that. There's just, it's unfortunate that things landed between me and Dave where they did, because as I said right from the beginning, they didn't have to. And I made it very clear on the phone call when they were firing me that they didn't have to do that. It was unnecessary. This, whatever those circumstances are, were nothing to be feared. It was, it just, we can move on, you know what I mean? But whatever, they made their decision, and so let the chips fall where they may, So I don't really even like going back to that period of time, because I felt like there was a lot leading up to that stuff behind the scenes, conversations that Dave and I were having that about things that, maybe we just weren't agreeing on, and that's okay. You can agree to disagree. You don't have to agree on everything. I like, Bobby Blitz said something really good to me when I was touring with Overkill, because he said he and Dee Dee, they're the boss. They run Overkill. They run the band. And he said, no matter how we go into the room with separate ideas, we come out as one voice. And I thought, man, that's a great way to put it. And I always felt like Dave and I did that. No matter what we felt like when we got in the room, we leave this room as one voice. And Dave being the leader, Dave being the self-appointed, voice of the group, let him have that voice, So I always felt like I stood behind that. I was unified with him, whether I agreed with it or not. You get on board with it, and that's what it is, and you go with that. And look, for the most part, Dave's way worked pretty good. I wasn't there to defy that.
Yeah, and speaking of Megadeth music, obviously you'll be out with Kings of Thrash, doing some of the Megadeth songs that maybe Megadeth won't be playing on these farewell tours, playing with Jeff Young, Chris Poland, and being able to kind of celebrate the Megadeth catalog your own way, with Kings of Thrash, and being able to go out and play those songs for the fans.
Well, yes, 100%. And, talking about bringing former members up on stage, that was one thing I really have enjoyed doing with Kings of Thrash. Not just me and Jeff, but Chris Poland, Chuck Beeler. I did reach out to Sean Drover about coming up, and it was a bit of a schedule conflict for him when we were in his area in Atlanta. And I wish we could have, and hopefully we will at some point moving forward. I like that. I like bringing up some of these the members that were part of the group for a while. There's some members that don't want to. They don't want to come anywhere near Megadeth music, or for whatever their reasons are. They're like, nah, I'll pass. I don't want to be. That was a period of my life, and I'm out. I'm done. I'm not coming back to that. I've remained friends pretty much with everybody from the past, and it's just my nature, I guess.
Yeah.
The Minnesota Nice, the bass player,
Right.
yeah, whatever. And look, if I were in Megadeth, I think it might look a little differently. You know what I mean? Maybe it would be a bit more inclusive. I always go back to, I remember when Dave was calling all of us about doing a new record and putting it together in 2004, which became The System Has Failed. I thought, what a great way to come back is celebrating the legacy even at that point. But clearly that was not the plan. It was, it was about Dave and really more him being a solo. I mean, quite honestly, since 2004, it's basically been a solo project. It's been him, his way, and that's what it is. You can't fight it. So just either be part of it or don't. I mean, it's that simple. So, but I always liked the thing that Anesthesia did, where they came back together, they did that tour, they brought everybody back.
Right.
I thought that was cool. I thought, as a fan of both of those groups, that would be super awesome, so I think there's a few different ways to do it. Again, I don't know what their plans are, so I don't want to go. I'm not here to bash on Dave, and I'm certainly not here to bash on Megadeth, because I'm part of Megadeth forever, for always, just if nothing else by way of through those songs,
Yeah.
So I don't want to be like guys where you see guys just bashing on each other publicly. I don't like that. I don't like to see my heroes arguing, because to some degree my heroes, they're not human. You know what I mean? Like, they're superhero. I guess even the Avengers argue with each other a bit, so maybe superheroes do argue, but but you just asked me what my feelings are on it. Those are my feelings on it, and feelings change. Feelings are not facts, and they change.
Right.
Suddenly 6 months from now, I may go, whatever. I could have a different thought on it. But yeah, like I said, since the announcement's been more recent, I went through sort of processing. For me, it was more about processing all of the decades of what it was, and I'm not going to lie. I do have a sadness about it, because it's closing a door of what we created, and closing the door of what once was. So there was a little bit of maybe grieving, a little bit, and maybe I'll continue to go through that now. I don't know.
I was going to say that the text messages that you and I have had since this announcement have been like the 7 stages of grieving, the anger, denial, all, everything that, you've,
Right.
you've definitely gone through the stages of grieving the band.
Well, and, grieving different phases of the band, because there were certain phases of the band that in hindsight were a lot more fun than while we were in it. And there's phases of the band, and that doesn't necessarily mean the 4 members. Sometimes that was managers who came in and influenced things, and there's a lot that was involved in that, and I think the other side of it too is, feeling dismissed, cast out, didn't matter. You were just, like when Bud Prager was there and said, Dave is Bruce Springsteen and you guys are just the E Street Band,
Right.
and hearing at one point that there was a comment made that all the band members in Dave's band they're like cheap suits. They could be exchanged. They could be changed at any time. Those kind of comments. And it's just sort of like that dismissive attitude toward any band member. And I'm very careful in my own groups, in my own settings, that it's like, everyone's here for a reason. And it's kind of divinely put together. If you really. Again, if I'm going to believe that there's some higher power, that there's something greater than us, sort of commandeering the ship here called life. It is what it is for a reason. And, no sooner was that announcement made and my phone was ringing and I was off doing 20 other things. And it made me realize that if all that is a part of my past, that it's not going to be part of my present anymore, then there's plenty of other stuff. I found it interesting that ironically that announcement came out and the next day the Ellefson Soto record dropped. So I think that just goes to show I'm certainly not sitting around lamenting it. I'm not sitting around going, well, and I have nothing else going on. And I know people like to pick my comments apart about, not having to work anymore. And the truth of it is, I've done pretty well. I've been smart with my money, and I set myself up so that my life could just be about playing music now. You know what I mean? And it wasn't that way in 2002 when the band broke up. I took that job working for Peavey. I had a young family. Life was expensive back then. So life changes too. So as you get to our ages, you'd like to think, well, maybe we can head toward sort of retiring from having to work and do jobs and do these things. There's royalty income, there's other things. So I'll say this too. I'm thankful for Dave. I'm thankful for all that we did together. I'm thankful for this. I don't think it was, again, if you're going to be a man of faith, I look at that thought at age 16, I get the instinct to go to Hollywood. 2 years later, I drive there with an apartment. And that's it. I move in and Dave's upstairs and he's 6 weeks out of Metallica and we go on to form Megadeth and do that. That was that random chance? I don't think so.
That's crazy.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I have to think that everything that's happened in and around Megadeth, everything that's happening now in the final days of it, the story's not over, and there's a sort of higher chord at work. There's a higher source at work, and that's just me speaking as my own ideas of what faith is, that it's like, well, that's what it is for now. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. And maybe I should reserve judgment on any of it and just sit back and keep trucking away on the stuff that I'm doing. My calendar's full. Like I said, I think Kings of Thrash fills a very good void in the story. And I'm not going out trying to be Megadeth. I'm not calling it Megadeth. I'm not doing any of that. I'm just going out as my friends playing the songs we like and songs that we know deserve to be heard because the fans want to hear them. And that's it. Yeah. And if anything, we're honoring the catalog. We're making sure everybody still gets paid. The songwriters, everything else, the records we've made. And so I think I, as I always do that with a sense of building things up rather than tearing things down. And that's just my nature, is I'm always one to build things up together.
Right. Well, I know this is a quick check-in for the listeners, and I had one more question for you. One kind of thing that's kind of come out, it's people to keep asking is you came out with a statement recently saying that you didn't want to re-record No Life to Leather. That was one of the initial issues that you kind of had with Dave. And then it pops up that you are actually on a compilation record called No Life to Leather, where you do the Anesthesia. So kind of talk about that and when the kind of juxtaposition there.
Okay. Well, first of all, I was not in Metallica. Anesthesia Pulling Teeth was not on No Life Till Leather. Well, the record, I didn't know what the record was going to be called. It's on.
It is wild that they named it No Life to Leather.
Yeah, they called it No Life to Leather, a tribute to the early Metallica. Okay. Now look, in Kings of Thrash, we've played Metallica songs. In fact, we play one of Dave's songs, "Jump in the Fire," because I just like the song. Right. We may play other ones. In fact, I even talked to the guys that said, you know what, one of my favorite Metallica recordings is No Life to Leather. We should actually play that one day. Like, we should do a tour and play No Life to Leather, or at least part of it. Why not? It's a cool part. It's the downbeat of thrash metal, really, as far as I'm concerned. When Dave came in the studio wanting to record that, or into the session or the room, the tour, we were preparing to make a new Megadeth album. I don't think Megadeth should play Metallica songs, period. No matter who wrote them. Dave, we did it once. We played Mechanics, right? We did it once in the beginning. There was a legal issue over it. Metallica took issue with it back then. I forgot even what it was. Because that was Dave's version of the song, but as it got recorded, it was changed. And Four Horsemen, James and Lars were also co-writers on it. It's kind of the only time that I know of where there's two versions of a song, and the publishing is split separate.
Right.
So there's that. There's the other version. The other thing is, Metallica were gracious enough to come to us and do the Big Four. Okay. In and around that period, they had offered for Dave to put out the No Life Till Leather demo, and he didn't agree with it. And his reasons are his reasons. I don't even have an opinion on it. But it didn't work out, and they didn't put it out. So as a result, and as I understand it, was around the splits of the songwriting. And those are Dave's reasons. I personally thought it was a great thing. I think it would have, Dave would have made money. It would have officially stamped him, deemed him as a recorded member of Metallica, which
I never thought about that.
That's kind of what he always wanted. Jumping up and playing on the Big Four was cool because that was also what he wanted, a moment to get on stage. So I'm glad we got to share that together, and I got to be there as a brother and a friend to him on that. But for them to put that out with the good energy around the Big Four, I thought was super cool of them. It would have been good for Dave. Hey, believe me, I've had to take it in the shorts over songwriting money and publishing a gazillion times,
Right.
I mean, there's stuff on Take No Prisoners, that line, that's not what your country can do for you, or what you get, that line, that I came up with that. I didn't get credited or paid for it. I wrote the chorus, the whole chorus chant and the intro bass line for Crush 'Em. And that was a big single on TV. I didn't get paid for that. I was told, Dave said, no, me and Bud are writing the song after I fucking contributed and I didn't get paid. So, I mean,
right.
I wrote, the melodies and lyrics to the song that became Soldier On, the last album. And, once I got kicked out of the band, they, rewrote the fucking, took all my words off of it, and I didn't get paid. So, I mean, Dave got kicked out of Metallica, got paid, got his songs used, and his name is on there, and he didn't have to sue him to get the money. So, I mean, I feel that could have been good for him, and I wished he would have done it. I think if he would have just gone along with it, it would have been good for him. My opinion, again, I'm not Dave. This is where he and I think different. So for Silver Linings to come to me and ask me to play, to record this song, I've got every right to, and why wouldn't I? Right now, here I'll tell you this much. In the beginning, I was like, oh, fuck, really? That song of all songs? Like, that's this coveted holy grail of a piece of music,
Right.
Like, I don't know if anybody's ever covered it. It's kind of like asking someone to cover Eruption by Eddie Van Halen. You're like, no, I'm out. No, there's a gazillion shredders who can play it. They're everywhere, right? But to officially play it, and especially, being a guy of a different style of, I talked to him when they called me about it. I'm like, is there any other song I can play?
Right.
Like,
you sure don't want something else?
Yeah, and I told him, I said, I don't even play like that. I don't even play like Cliff. I said, Cliff and I grew up together. We came up at the same time, two different styles. He's a finger player. I'm a pick player. So, it's funny. I went down and I saw Metallica in Munich in May last year, right as this whole thing was coming to fruition. And I talked to Lars about it, and he said, and he even said the same thing. It's like, that's weird. You play very different and pick and fingers. So we had a friendly conversation about it. And I just said, what do you think? And because they don't mind that people do these tribute records. That's my first question. Do you even care? Like, is this going to be like a problem? He said, no, they don't care. They're cool with it. And I, at the end of it, I said, what do you think? He goes, just go make it your own, So I feel like I had his blessing,
Nice.
just as a brother and as a friend. He just goes, well, just go make it your own, So I did. And, it comes out, I think, in November. And I tried to do kind of an homage. I realized, okay, if I tried to play this thing exactly note for note like he did, Look, you're going to get slaughtered either way. Some people will go, Buck Jr., he sucks, Cliff Burton
Right.
rules. And other people will go, hey, that was pretty cool. And other people, who knows and who cares? At some point, you don't do shit for people's opinion. You know what I mean? You just don't. You do it because you were asked, and I dug into it. And I'll say this. I sat here with my bass trying to play it, and I was just like, oh, I don't even know where to start because it's such a unique piece. So I called James Chen, who I know. I met him at NAMM because he worked for Aria Pro and Morley pedals. So they have this Cliff Burton signature Aria Pro bass and the fuzz wah pedal, which Cliff made popular, right? That's a big part of that song. So I called James and go, dude, I got this call to do this. Can you send me this stuff? So he did right away. He sent me the bass, which has light gauge rotosound strings on it. Which makes it a lot easier. I'm gonna say, and then he sent me the pedal, and once I plugged all that in, I went, oh, okay, now it makes sense, right? In order to get the feel of it, so that helped. I mean, that not only helped, it made it possible to play it. That's what I did. I went into, John Acolino's place, the Focusrite room. And John is actually the guitar player from that band Icon, and which is, they're like local heroes here in town.
Nice.
They were on Capitol Records, I think, right before Megadeth was there. So I do a lot of recording there at his place. So we got in there and put the piece together, and I'm happy. I feel like it turned out to be more of an homage to Cliff. A respectful, homage to him is how I look at it. And now that I see who all else is on the record, I think I would think everybody else did the same thing. Saxon, Diamond Head, Testament, everybody. It's done respectfully toward our friends, Metallica. And so to me, I consider it a great honor to do it. And I'm grateful to be part of it.
Nice. I guess my last question, and I guess we'll wrap it up on this too, is did you play with your fingers or did you play with a pick?
No, I played with a pick. I tried to. I tried to play with the fingers, and I was like, it's like everything when I go in the studio. I'll play with fingers, like just getting a tone, right, as we do, right? Mm-hmm. The engineer's dialing up a tone, and we're playing. And I'll put the pick, and I always kind of start with a pick, ding, 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 get a nice tone, and then I'll switch to fingers, and the engineer will always look at me and go, "What did you just do?" I said, "Oh, I put the pick down." Right. He goes, "Don't do that. Give the pick sounds better." Right. Always. I mean, I'm talking on ballads, anything, because that's why Carol Kay, from the Wrecking Crew, when she, and you probably can't hear this with the earbuds in, but when you strike the string, you hear the fundamental tone of the instrument, not just a pickup, but the instrument. In fact, I was just at EMG and we're talking about that. When I pick up a bass, as much, EMG pickups are great, but if it doesn't have a fundamental tone in the instrument, the pickup can only do so much, so the better the piece of wood in the instrument, that just makes the pickup's job easier, so right. To me, to me, it just seemed easier. Not easier. I'm going to use the word easier. It sounded better to use the plectrum, and that was for me. So when it comes out, just everybody just hold your horses and just know that it was done out of kindness and ultimate respect for Cliff and for my friends in Metallica, and that's it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Dave. I just wanted to, like I said, I just wanted to jump on and clarify a couple of things, so just thanks everybody for checking out the show and continue to comment and all that good stuff, and we will talk to you soon.
Cool.